Edition of a program about Yugoslavia, the targets. And today we have in studio Nico Varkevisser. He's chairman of Links International. He can tell us about himself and organization that he represents. Nico, can you tell us how long this organization exists and what is the target, to say so, and the meaning of it?
Links International is has been founded last year out of an initiative, Global Reflection, on which we have worked before. The main objective of the organization is to contribute in the Netherlands to the movement internationally on issues of international solidarity and peace. And for that reason, we have a monthly publication. It's called Targets, in which we try to describe international developments of all continents and what it means in matters of peace and development.
So it means that you don't. You are not focused only on one theme, for example, Yugoslavia and bombardment and aggression and war in Yugoslavia, but also other events throughout the world.
Yes. It's clear that Yugoslavia, in this particular moment, is a very crucial issue for the European development and European security. But Yugoslavia, unfortunately, is not only a key issue. When we look at the world map now, we see Southern Africa as a very dangerous spot. We see Indonesia. We see a massive build-up of armament, of American armament in Colombia. The developments in Eastern Europe, Russia. So the whole development in the European Union. There are a lot of spots in the world that has the potential of great danger and of major development. So we try within the possibilities we have to ride on that.
So, but particularly you mentioned Europe. At the moment, the most important and the most dangerous is what happened a year ago in Yugoslavia, and how this all started. Can you tell us why all that happened?
Well, there are many complex developments before last year, and it would be a very long story to tell all about that, but mainly as we see it is that Yugoslavia, by the big powers in the world, has to be removed from the map. That is the main issue, and that is a process that started already in 1990. We all know there is a very famous law passed in that year by American Congress, that law that demanded the split up of Yugoslavia. The difference between the Kosovo War and the conflicts before is that you could say that the conflicts before was an internal conflict, so to speak, although the Western powers have influenced that strongly. We all know the role of Germany by this separation of Croatia and Slovenia. We all know how NATO force has intervened in the attack on the Krajina. But the Kosovo War is in that sense a very different case, that for the first time NATO has attacked a sovereign country in Europe without any legitimate backup from the United Nations. In another aspect, you could say that Kosovo was a clearly military solution for a political conflict. And when Madeleine Albright says that the way NATO is operating in Kosovo will be an example of how NATO will do so in this century we have just entered, then we can be very terrified that these military campaigns will follow in other issues.
Does it mean then implementing a new world order? As we can see that this kind of handling the things and dealing with the political crisis by using excessive and out of proportion use of military power doesn't bring any solution. In fact, make things from bad to worse.
Well, I think the word new order should be the new disorder, because it is clear that the balance of power from the Cold War period is over. There is a tremendous shift going on in countries, in frontiers, in relations between countries. And what we can see is that particularly the Western powers are trying by force, not only military force, but also with economic force, to control the world. And the danger of the situation now is that up till now, this battle for the control of the world, and especially the energy resources of the world, has not been finished. And that's the other danger element in the Kosovo crisis. We haven't only seen an attack, a brutal attack on a sovereign country, which was no threat for any European country at all. This attack hides also increasing tension between the powers themselves, in particular Germany and the United States.
So what I can understand, there is not only question of economic interest, but also question of political interest. Who has more influence in Europe? Battle between Germany and America itself for political influence in Europe?
Well, it is known that Brzezinski has written a massive book about it. The American strategy is to control the whole circle from the Balkans to Tibet, including the Middle East, the Caucasus, and the northern part of India, etc. That is for the United States decisive to control, to maintain their position as a superpower. And it is clear that the Balkan is a very strategic spot in that. The power that controls the Balkan controls not only the European developments, but also the development in Russia. So the fight we have seen around Kosovo is who is controlling that area. And I have the feeling that the United States is now already heading for other spots that is linked with this, and in particular will that be the Ukraine. That will be one of the major danger spots in the world to come.
So to say, America seems to me like trying to intervene here and there all over the place, mainly by military means and with a sort of arrogance. It looks to me like one elephant in a glass shop. Wherever he moves, he breaks the things, and when he leaves, it's only a mess. How we can react to that? Is there some balance, and how can we prevent this?
The situation in Yugoslavia is not only a product of the policy of the United States. Recently there has been published a book in Germany, Der Weg in den Krieg, that explains in detail the German role in this. But the breakup of Yugoslavia is not the result of the United States. It was in fact Germany and the Vatican who forced the breakup of Yugoslavia by separating Croatia and Slovenia.
Just remember, Vatican was the first who gave to Croatia $5 million and one of the first who recognized independent Croatia.
Exactly. Okay. There is an historical line in German policy, and that is to have access to the Balkans, because that's for Germany the access to the oil fields in the Middle East. And for that reason, Yugoslavia was a result of the First World War, mainly promoted by England and France as a strong state against German expansion. And we can see that from the First World War on, starting with Adolf Hitler and also the West German governments after the war, is to get rid of all the states that were the result of the First World War. So we see the breakup of Czechoslovakia, which was also a state as after the First World War, the breakup of Yugoslavia, but also the disintegration of the Soviet Union fits in that plan, and even the disintegration of Belgium. So the Germans have an historic line to break up these states that could be an obstacle for that expansion. How do the Germans promote this breakup? Behind a very left slogan, the sovereignty of the peoples. That's what they promote. But behind that so nice sound slogan, behind that the Germans are promoting an ethnic separation of Europe. It is a Europe of the tribes. We all know that during the Second World War, Hitler had his special groepen, that they call them, to find out where ethnic tensions were and how could they use these ethnic tensions to create tendency of movements for separatism and independence. And what we see now in Yugoslavia is a reshaping of that country through the lines, through the borders that Hitler already drew during the Second World War. So in that respect, the whole debate now that human rights are more important than the sovereignty of the states, that is a mechanism to intervene and to promote ethnic separation, ethnic segregation in Europe, in a variety of small powerless countries that could ultimately be easily dominated. That is the German goal, and the Kosovo War is more, let's say, the product of that German policy than the United States. In '98, NATO was still prepared to send 10,000 troops to the border of Albania to protect, to prevent militarization of Kosovo, with the support of the Albanian government. And it was a veto of the Germans that prevented NATO to send troops that could maybe prevent this war. So we see the Germans pushing for war. The Germans have stated very clearly an ethnic separated Albania. The United States comes in this picture because it was convenient for the United States to start a military operation without United Nations. If such a precedent would be created, it would serve US interest for future operations. But so far as we can see, is the United States had an opinion of a war of 2-3 days bombing, maybe a week, and then finish it. Yeah. But the United States have never decided and never contemplated the idea of sending ground troops. And the Germans were pushing for ground troops.
English also British pushed very much for ground troops.
Yeah, there is an Anglo-Saxon alliance, and the position of the English is in maybe more anti-German than pro-US. So this war in Yugoslavia is a very complicated issue. There are many hidden agendas. Every power has its own interests. But the main issue, and that is where the US and Germany agreed on, is the breakup of Yugoslavia, and which means that the war is not over yet. that it is a very, very real threat that they will continue. We have published last year about a secret plan the Germans and the US agreed on. It's called Operation Roots, in which they state that Montenegro and the Vojvodina and Kosovo should be ripped off of Yugoslavia. So we see now that the preparation of possible new wars, the provocations in the southern part of Serbia, which are financed and supported by the Albanian leader Vukosi, who has millions and millions collected in Germany with support of the German Secret Service. We see the threatening situation around Kosovo Mitrovica, where the only multi-ethnic city still in Kosovo, where they want to get rid of the Serbs and the other non-Albanians.
Yeah, that's we can read in every report that Serbs there are living really in ghettos. There are a group of Serbs who have been accused of some wrongdoings. They are imprisoned now for less than about a month. They are striking. They are having a hunger strike, wanting to be brought to trial, and their situation to be cleared up. But so far there is no recall. They are just sitting there and suffering on their fighting for their rights. But to go a little bit back to the formulation that you said, and I agree with that America and Germany, let's say NATO, used as a reason to attack other countries, sovereign countries, human rights, violation of human rights. But if we look a bit wider than only Yugoslavia, we can see a violation of human rights in also Western countries, for example in Europe. In Baskia, in Spain, Basque people have not much rights. They are fighting for freedom for, as far as I know, over 30 years. North Ireland, and then Corsica, and then Kurdish people in Turkey, they've been systematically chased, killed, and prosecuted. There is no public spotlight on it. Nobody knows. It happened behind the screens. There is no news about it. Now, after the war, which I will not say that war is finished in Yugoslavia and Kosovo, Serbian people, we don't see them on television. They're suffering. There's 300,000 chased away from Kosovo. There is 2,000 killed and about 3,000 wounded, and many disappeared from Kosovo. And we don't see that on the news. How can we describe this situation? Is that normal, or what can we do about that?
Well, human rights is a tool for the Western powers to intervene when they like to, and they apply that in a very hypocritical way. I mean, the Dutch government has supported for more than 20 years an Indonesian government with 9 till 10 billions of guilders, while we knew that Indonesia had concentration camps, while we knew that there was very severe atrocities and violations of human rights. There are other issues. The Western powers did not intervene in Africa. The Western powers defend the blockade of the embargo of Iraq, which caused the death of 1.5 million people, as to an intervention on human rights. So
and
this is a big lie.
Sanctions are still on power in Iraq, and now and then when somebody is in America don't sleep good, he just throw bombs on Iraq or somewhere else. This cannot be the way that we accept.
The Germans formulated that already in 1918 by Mr. Max von Baden, when he said, how can we how can we defend how can we apply an imperial policy that in the face of the severest criticism worldwide could maintain? and he said that can only be done if we give a moral and ethical element to our policy. So that for the first time appears human rights. Say that you operate in the name of human rights and you can kill and you can bomb and you can do whatever you want. And the mainstream media is defending it and is feeding it, is not informing people anymore. It is building images, labeling people, and then you attack these labels. And that's why people, it's extremely difficult for the people to know what is going on, because they are manipulated by emotions. And in the Kosovo war, it was so clear that these fugitives you saw coming by trains, that was a stage as it was for Schindler's List. To create, and that was the biggest trick where the Germans succeeded, by putting the Serbs in the shoes of the Nazis, by saying the Serbs are the Nazis, by comparing Serbia with Auschwitz. And that trick succeeded in having at least the majority of the people neutral or reluctant to act. Because one thing they are terrified of is if masses of people are going in the streets to demonstrate. That's why we saw in this country, the day before the demonstration, suddenly the poll said 2/3 of the people are in favor of NATO bombing, which is not true. I mean, even this D66 leader, De Graaf, said that he estimated that 1/3 of his party, D66, was totally split in that. That in the Social Democratic Party, the PvdA, was a big debate going on. They manipulated also the media by convincing people everyone agrees with what we do, because they're terrified that, and that's why they want to end that war quickly, because they were terrified if masses of people go out in the street and say, we don't, this war, this is not our war, it's not in our interests, and it's certainly not a solution. And that's why, and that's very striking, last week we had a debate in the parliament on Kosovo. There wasn't hardly anything mentioned in the press. They are desperately hiding the fact that they made out of this operation the biggest failure, the biggest crime in the last days of the last century. They have bombed a country for decades back in history. They are responsible for an ethnic cleansing as has never seen before since the ethnic cleansing of Croatia. They have put in power criminals, gangs that controls drug traffic, women traffic. The Spanish paper El País published a few weeks ago an article that the Albanians in Spain, the last 4 years, committed at least 2,000 criminal attacks in Spain. They have brought disorder, they brought the Wild West in Kosovo, they have ruined that country, they are not able to protect these people, they don't want even to protect these people. The only thing they hope now is how can we get out as soon as possible. But they have a mess out of it and they are responsible for it.
So we can consider as a whole campaign against Yugoslavia, against Serbia proper, inadequate, disproportional, and at all unsuccessful, a big failure. And America is now trying to get out of it, out of that mess.
It was successful. It was not successful in what they promised to bring. It was very clear. It was successful in what they want to achieve, to separate Kosovo from Yugoslavia.
But that situation is unclear. It's not over yet. But to go back to recall back, I think the major mistake is that NATO troops didn't disarm the UÇK paramilitary groups. They let them to come back to Kosovo with their weapons, and they've been searching for revenge, and still going on until 1 year after. We can see on a daily basis that Serbian houses and churches are burning, people get killed, kidnapped. There is also confirmed news that there are even concentration camps run by Albanian terrorists but we don't see it on the picture. And how long this can go on? How long we can stay ignorant and not interested to change that situation? And the West only blame Milosevic for war crimes and mass murders, while there is no evidence of mass killings and mass graves.
Well, what is clear is that in Kosovo was a civil war going on. Yes, and the Serbian forces have done their bit in the problems there were in that area. It's not a matter of good guys and bad guys. There has happened things on both sides that are very serious. But the issue is, it's not so much a mistake of them not disarming the KLA, from our point of view, or from the point of view if you want to bring order. But they didn't want to disarm the KLA.
They didn't.
They didn't want it. They did it because they need a KLA. They wanted to expel the Serbs. I mean, we have spoken here with the leader of the Jewish community in Pristina. He asked for help from the British. They are not interested. The Dutch troops said literally to the Serbs in Orahovac, we are not for you here, we are for the Albanians. They asked us to come. You didn't want us to come. They didn't do anything. Yes, no ordinary soldiers try to, but it's a fact that even Dutch officers prevented Dutch soldiers to intervene against killing and against arsoning houses. So they don't want the order they promised. They want to get rid of the Serbian community and the non-Albanian community in Kosovo to find a solution in there that fits them.
It's rather strange that one paramilitary formation, the UČK, used NATO on their sides as an alliance. How can that happen? Have they been paid for that? Is it big money playing the role, or it
is the other way around. The other way around. It is NATO who uses the KLA. KLA, when the Yugoslav forces in '98, in the summer of '98, when the attacks of the Albanians became so severe, the Yugoslav army succeeded in controlling the area. And to be very precise, it's very interesting to see that the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs has published articles or documents for the courts in Germany who had to decide about the asylum of Albanians in Germany. And in February, before the bombing, January, February, March, before the bombing, the German documents of the Foreign Affairs said the situation is becoming normal. Albanians are going back to their home. There is no need to give a permission to stay to these Albanians here in Germany. They can go back. And in fact, now the Germans want to expel in one way, more than 100,000 Albanians to back to Kosovo.
They want to get rid of them.
The thing is, the Western powers demanded from the Yugoslav in the autumn of '98 to withdraw their troops, and the Yugoslav government did so in order to create a situation of normalization. And when the Yugoslav forces withdraw, the KLA, with support of Germany, came in. The New York Times wrote in '98 that the KLA was a German product. They are wearing German uniforms. German was the official language. They had German arms. The Germans, the Albanians had in Germany their biggest fundraising organization. I think it's For the Fatherland or something like that, that collected more than 250 million German marks. That could only be done with support of the German government. And it is the publication, The European, mentioned in '98. It became, in '98, in a moment, became a clash between the CIA and the BND, the German Secret Service. That the CIA could no longer accept German influence in that area. Because in February 98, the United States official language of the KLA was terrorism. The ambassador in Macedonia, American ambassador, said the KLA were criminals, were terrorists.
I remember that report, yeah.
But because of the German influence and the German operations in that area, the US took the initiative, and when the United States takes initiatives, it's with force, with bombing, with military action.
Okay, I can see that connection, but still I cannot understand that the other Western governments did together. They followed Germany and American policy on the Balkans. For example, Netherlands and France, England, and all the other Western governments, NATO countries, they simply followed.
No.
There was no resistance. There was.
That's a shameful thing. The Dutch government, the Dutch parliament had no influence, not in starting the war, and not in the targets they bombed in the war. It is a shameful thing that this war was led by Albright, by Fischer, and by Blair. And the Dutch government was used as, they say, little dogs. And I know, maybe you know that Shelton has testified before the United States Congress, and he said literally there were some countries who were making problems about targeting humanitarian objects, etc., but not the Dutch. The Dutch were like little dogs who want to sit on the table, and he said literally they have the right to sit on the table because they have good planes and they did exactly what we want. We could say to them, tomorrow you go there, and then the Dutch said, yes boss, we will be there. And that is never seen in the history of this country such a servile, cowardless,
just following the leader.
Just following the leader because Amro Bank and Albert Heijn has the money put in the United States.
But what does it mean? What is the interest of? Is it in interest in the Dutch government or any Western governments to cause the crisis, to go and bomb sovereign country and provoke such a big humanitarian disaster and so many refugees to come to the Western countries? Is that the aim of the policy, or it's?
I think for many parliamentaries it is, they didn't even know simply what was going on. I mean, I heard Paul Rosemuller telling in May 2nd last year, when a reporter asked him, but Mr. Rosemuller, no president of any country could sign the Rambouillet dictate. And he said, oh no, why not? I don't know anything about that. They didn't even know, and they didn't even ask. They just follow because the Green Left wants to be in the future government. That's the price you have to pay. And anyone who took another stand within these parties was verbally lynched. And people were very afraid of speaking out because everybody who says the minimum of critics was automatically pro-Milosevic. That's the way they play it. And of course it is not in our interest as country to have a war against Yugoslavia. Absolutely not. That's why we did our best to raise as much as a movement against this war.
Is it not simply better to consider a political solution, which means first of all getting to know the historical and political background of the crisis, and not to provoke it, not to stir it up, and then to bear the consequences, but it's better to invest in those countries if there is some economical and political unrest, to calm down and invest and make everybody satisfied, create the jobs, instead to do opposite, to destroy factories, to destroy infrastructure, which is very much done so in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia before was a civilized country, very much developed, connected with Europe, and now we see that after 1 year of all that campaign, that Yugoslavia is bombed back to Stone Age. All infrastructure is destroyed. There is no jobs. There are many people without any income. There is very much going on under the poverty line. People are simply suffering, and above of that we have economic sanctions against a country which wants to integrate in European society, wants to join the European market, and wants to be democratic. And only what we hear is they give help to Montenegro and another Balkan countries. They call it Marshall Plan or Pact for Stability in Balkan, in which Serbia is excluded. They want that Yugoslavia get first democratized democratically. But I don't see that they blame Milosevic for all that. They claim him as a war criminal. But I don't see any leader who would announce democratic elections while in every corner, throughout the globe, there is posters and photos of him as a war crime. I don't think any government or any president will announce democratic elections while everybody is hunting him. There is no way out for him.
Well, I think that they made a big mistake by suing him for war crimes. First of all,
there are no evidence that he.
That's one thing. It was a political decision. But the other thing is that what you can see now is that despite what they said there is no democracy, they are allowed to demonstrate, and they do frequently, during all the time. What they have achieved with their bombings is that Mr. Milosevic has a stronger support from the people. The so-called opposition is so financed, openly financed by the West, that for many Yugoslav people it is not an alternative. So, and with the indictment of war crimes, they have locked themselves in an impossible position. That's the same thing they have with Saddam Hussein in Iraq.
Yeah, so
he's still there and they have to deal with him. And how do you deal with a man that you have indicted as a war crime? That is the big problem. Now, one thing is clear with the whole thing of these Balkan Stability Pact. There can be no economic and political stability and recovery of that area if you exclude Yugoslavia. That's the center, that's the core of that area, and if you leave that out, any future plan, all the money you invest in other parts is a waste. They are not interested in recovering the Balkans. They never will do that. They're not going to rebuild the infrastructure. The economists said, we are not going to invest in Kosovo. We are only there because we hope that when Serbia falls, we have a better fruit for us to take. But what is the issue of Yugoslavia? The US bombed very specific areas in Yugoslavia, because Yugoslavia is strategically very important. It's the connection of the Central Europe to the Mediterranean area and the Middle East. But it's also the connection between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. And the Black Sea is of big importance because of the oil from the Caucasus. So the US were bombing corridors that could potentially, for Europeans, corridors to pump oil to the Western markets. The corridor from Romania, Vojvodina, Croatia, Italy. They bombed the Danube for that reason. And the only area that the United States prefers as a corridor for future oil transport is from Burgos in Bulgaria to Albania. Bulgaria, Macedonia, Albania. That's the corridor.
Adriatic Sea.
Exactly. So the only thing they are interested in the Balkan is to control these areas, to pump the oil from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, because the entrance of the Black Sea, the Bosporus, is very tiny, and this tanker traffic wouldn't be impossible to bring all the oil to the Western markets. So it is a fight on strategic positions, oil transport. That's why the Ukraine is becoming a very dangerous spot as well, because that's another possible transport route from the Black Sea to the Western markets, from Odessa to Poland.
Okay, just to ask you one more question. The present situation in Serbia itself, it's very desperate. There are economic sanctions, people are suffering, infrastructure is not recovering, economy is for the next 20 years no sign that it's going to recover so quickly. What is to be done? According to me, I think economic sanctions should be stopped immediately.
Yeah.
And to be invest in Yugoslavia, in Serbia proper, and Kosovo problem still remains. What do you think, what should be done, how to solve that problem?
The only solution, I think, what can be done is that there has to come a change of political attitude. The first thing that has to change is that we have to demand from our governments that they are going to talk with the Yugoslav. It's absolutely nonsense to say you can't talk with Mr. Milosevic, says Wim Kok. Yeah. We can't talk with Milosevic. And I ask myself, what have you done in Dayton? Yeah. How did you came to this agreement of Resolution 1244? You have spoken with him. So the first thing that should be changed is a change of political attitude, in the sense that we are starting to have open debates with the Yugoslav government to end immediately the blockade. And third is a full implementation of the resolution of the Security Council. 1244. If the resolution 1244 is not implemented strictly, it will be very difficult in the future to discuss with the Yugoslav government to agree on any other UN resolution.
Yeah, if they break their own proposals and law, how they can accept the other?
And the big thing is what in the press is hardly discussed. It's the consequences not only for Serbia and Kosovo, but the consequences could be very severe with Russia. And it's not printed in the press, but Russia recently made a military agreement with Belarus, which allows Russia to put an army of 300,000 soldiers on the Polish border. The Putin is, in a very quick way, is militarizing and centralizing the country. And he has shown in the issue of Chechnya that he will use any force to implement his policy.
But what reflects on Yugoslavia? Now NATO countries have to deal with the new leadership, Russian leadership, which is something different than under Yeltsin. And NATO is now trying to negotiate, to try the way out, to get out of the Balkans without losing the face. But how to go on with that? That NATO is stubbornly insisting on suing Milosevic for war crimes, while the objective are not achieved in Kosovo itself. There is no peace, there is no war, there is cannot be any longer like that, because its situation has to be changed, because not only Serbia is suffering, but all the other Balkan countries are disconnected, which all the routes goes through Serbia.
Well, it's difficult to predict what's going on. I think the position of Russia will be very crucial. If Putin is selling Yugoslavia to the West, as Yeltsin has done last year, it's becoming very difficult. But if the Russian leadership says we don't accept the breakup of Yugoslavia, we defend the sovereignty of Yugoslavia, and we demand the implementation of Resolution 1244, it's also becoming very difficult, because in that way, if NATO have to withdraw, it could be the end of NATO, because it would be a severe loss of face.
They don't want to.
That's one element. But if the confrontation with Russia increases, it's not going to be fought in the Balkans. The clash will be in the northern German part, in Poland, and that's what they know. That's the historic battlefield between East and West. And there are signs. The Polish Secret Service a few weeks ago put on a report on internet site in which they say we cannot defend the eastern NATO borders from Russian spy activities. So this is going to be a huge. It could lead to a very huge European battle, in which we are not living in the sideline. We were in the center of the bombs. Don't forget that Putin has changed his strategy of using nuclear arms, and that is not such a fake threat. It's a real threat. If Russia feels that their security is at stake, they will use it.
But one more thing, to go back to Serbia and Serbian issue. Yugoslavia is not enemy. Serbia is not enemy of America or NATO. They should simply consider position as Serbia and stop interfering militarily and try to invest in Serbia to get reconnected in European market and standards, and to go back on business.
The point is, why is everybody hating so Serbia and the Serbian leadership? Because the Yugoslav government is the only government of Eastern Europe that said, we don't want NATO here, we don't want to enter NATO, we have no wish to buy all sorts of new weapons because we are in NATO. The Hungarian government already said we are in NATO but we can't pay. And a second issue, and that's very fundamental, the Yugoslav government said we will not privatize and hand over all our economy to Western investors.
Yeah.
We want to privatize, but in our own way. And we want to protect for the people what we have built up in these years. And Yugoslavia is the only country in Eastern Europe. In all other countries, they have sold out everything. They gave it away for nothing. The only government who says, no, we won't surrender, we don't give up anything, was the Yugoslav government. And that made them the target for the West. Because the West, that's why the expansion of NATO wants to militarize Eastern Europe, to use them as slaves for future work.
Yeah.
And for their raw materials.
So it means selling the weapons, extracting the economic resources, getting cheap labor.
Exploit it. So that the center, Germany, Benelux, the center here in Europe, can live good, in wealth, and all the surrounding states in the Mediterranean area, in Eastern Europe, not to speak from the other continents, are exploited as worse than slaves before.